A prophecy that has remained still for more than 26 centuries is beginning to move in Israel. Not in the expected ways, it is emerging outside the framework of conflict and political breakthroughs, but through a shift that aligns with one of the oldest statements recorded in Scripture, one that speaks of a restoration no generation before ours has ever witnessed. For centuries, scholars questioned when this line would activate. Entire eras passed without a single indication. Empires rose and disappeared, while the pattern stayed motionless. Even after Israel returned as a nation in 1948, the prophetic structure appeared incomplete. But in recent years, a detail buried deep within the biblical record has resurfaced. It is subtle, it is precise, and once it is seen, the timing becomes impossible to dismiss. Most of the world views Israel through the lens of geopolitics, border tensions, regional alliances, shifting negotiations. Attention remains fixed on the visible pressures surrounding the nation. Very few look at the internal transitions taking place beneath the surface. Yet Scripture places significant weight on these internal markers. They reveal movements that are not driven by war or diplomacy, but by the restoration of identity. A movement that advances quietly and with deliberate consistency. Israel is witnessing something without parallel in modern history: the return of its ancient languages. Not only the Hebrew spoken today, but the older forms of Hebrew used long before the Roman era. The forms written during the time of the kings. The forms carved into stone throughout the First Temple period. And alongside them, the language most associated with the days of Jesus, Aramaic, is being revived in unexpected communities. This movement goes far beyond cultural activity or academic curiosity. Its direction reflects a deeper return to foundations long out of reach. What is unfolding points to something deeper within the nation, a return toward foundations that had remained out of reach for almost 2,000 years. Across Israel's school system, students are learning to read and write Paleo-Hebrew, the script found in the earliest biblical inscriptions. Universities have expanded their work in ancient Semitic linguistics. Archaeological discoveries between 2023 and 2025 have produced a surge of inscriptions written in the same forms now being studied again. And in several regions, small groups of Jewish families are reviving Aramaic, the everyday language spoken across Judea in the 1st century. These developments are not isolated. They are not coincidental. Their timing sits outside the normal rhythm of cultural change. For more than 18 centuries, Hebrew was not the language of daily life. It was preserved only in prayer and study. No nation in recorded history has revived a dormant language for full, modern use. Israel accomplished that once at the turn of the 20th century. What is happening now goes further. It is the restoration of the earliest layers, forms untouched for generations, and long assumed to belong permanently to the past. When a nation begins reclaiming the language of its earliest identity, it signals more than educational reform. It indicates a shift in direction, a return to origins. Scripture presents such moments as prophetic indicators, signs that appear when a people realign with the role established for them. Zephaniah 3:9 contains a line often overlooked: "For then I will restore to the peoples a pure language." A restoration, not a reinvention, a return to what was lost. For the first time since those words were written, the conditions for such a restoration exist. The timing is unusual. The scale is increasing. The alignment between the texts being uncovered and the language being revived is too precise to ignore. Global attention remains fixed on Israel's external pressures. But Scripture shows that some of the most significant signals appear internally, in the identity, memory, and foundations of the people. And when those internal structures begin to shift, larger patterns soon follow. Something foundational is moving. Something long silent is reawakening. The restoration has begun, and the world has not recognized it. The return of ancient Hebrew, the language that should have disappeared. And why it is back. The story of ancient Hebrew is unlike that of any other language. Most languages follow predictable cycles. They rise, expand, fragment, and eventually dissolve into newer forms. Hebrew did not follow this path. It stepped out of daily life for more than 18 centuries, survived only in fragments, and then re-entered history with a strength no scholar expected. What is happening now goes even further. The earliest forms of the language, those used during Israel's first kingdom, are returning with clarity. To understand the significance of this shift, the historical timeline matters. How Hebrew faded from daily life. After the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, Hebrew entered a long period of silence. Communities scattered. Regions changed rulers. Generations grew up speaking other tongues. Hebrew remained present only in study and prayer. It was preserved through texts and tradition, but it could no longer be heard in markets, homes, or public life. For almost 2 millennia, Hebrew stayed in that condition, respected, examined, recited, but not lived. No other nation carried a language this way, dormant, yet waiting. The 19th and 20th century revival, a restoration no one predicted. In the late 1800s, a new stage began. Immigrants returning to the land brought dozens of languages with them. There was no unified speech. Communication fractured across communities. During this period, the idea of restoring Hebrew as a spoken language appeared unrealistic. Scholars wrote about the grammar. Students translated texts. But everyday use? That seemed impossible. Then a change took place. Families began speaking Hebrew at home. Children grew up hearing it as their first language. Within a generation, what had been silent for centuries became the foundation of a new society. By the time Israel was declared a nation in 1948, Hebrew had returned to the streets, classrooms, and public life. That revival alone was unprecedented. But what is unfolding now reaches even deeper. The unexpected return of Paleo-Hebrew. In the last few years, the older script, Paleo-Hebrew, has reappeared across several layers of Israeli society. This is the script used during the era of David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and the First Temple. For more than 2,000 years, it existed only on ancient stones, seals, and archaeological artifacts. Today, it is being taught again. Students in Israeli schools learn to recognize and write the characters. Researchers are examining the script with modern tools. New inscriptions discovered between 2023 and 2025 match the exact forms now being studied. This is not a symbolic gesture. It has become part of a broader return to origins, connecting modern Israel with the earliest phases of its identity. Why this matters more than linguistics. A language does more than communicate. It shapes how a people think, record history, and understand themselves. The return of ancient Hebrew signals a deeper restoration taking place inside the nation. Hebrew holds layers that reflect the formation of Israel's earliest history. Its structure is tied to the oldest biblical texts. When these older forms return, they reconnect the present with the foundations that shape the formation of the nation itself. This is why the timing is significant. Political shifts rise and fall quickly. Language restoration does not. It requires desire, intention, and identity. It emerges from the core of a people, not from external pressure. A pattern hidden in the biblical narrative. Throughout Scripture, the identity of Israel is often described in stages. The people gather. The land becomes productive. The cities are rebuilt. The worship is remembered. The language returns. This sequence appears repeatedly in the prophetic writings. The restoration of language is always placed near the end of the pattern, after the nation regains strength, but before larger transitions unfold. That pattern is visible again today. The role of education in the restoration. The shift is most evident in Israel's education system. Curriculums updated in recent years now include exposure to Hebrew's earliest scripts. Students are taught to read inscriptions discovered in archaeological sites. They compare ancient and modern forms. They learn the progression from Paleo-Hebrew to the square script used during the Second Temple era. These students represent the first generation in nearly 2,000 years who can read the earliest biblical scripts with clarity. The significance of this cannot be overstated. When children absorb the visual language of their ancestors, they develop a connection that goes beyond history. It ties them directly to the original texts, events, and periods described in Scripture. The broader return of identity. Alongside schools, research centers and universities are expanding programs focused on ancient Semitic languages. Linguists analyze inscriptions with new technologies. Scholars map how Hebrew evolved over centuries. These efforts are not casual academic interests. They reflect a focused shift toward recovering original identity markers. When a nation begins reclaiming its earliest expressions, the movement reflects more than intellectual curiosity. It indicates a shift in direction, a return to origins that had remained out of reach for generations. Why this moment is unique. The timing is unusual. The scale is growing. Archaeological discoveries align with linguistic revival. Institutions are investing resources into studying the earliest layers of the language, and public interest is increasing without any coordinated campaign. All of this points to a restoration unfolding quietly but consistently, an internal movement that aligns with the structure of Scripture. The revival of ancient Hebrew is not a return to the past. It is a reconnection with the foundation that shaped a people from the beginning. And when the foundation changes, the rest of the structure is never far behind. The return of Aramaic, the language of the first century. The language of Jesus and the unexpected resurgence. Aramaic occupies a unique position in the story of Israel. It was the everyday language spoken in homes, markets, and synagogues during the first century. It shaped conversations, teaching, and daily life across Judea and Galilee. Several sections of the Old Testament were written in it, and for generations, it served as the common speech for the communities living under Persian and early Roman rule. After the first century, Aramaic began to fade from Jewish life. Communities dispersed. Regions shifted politically and culturally. Other languages replaced it, leaving Aramaic preserved only in liturgical readings, ancient manuscripts, and scattered groups beyond Israel's borders. For most of recorded history, few expected to hear it spoken again in the land. Yet in recent years, a quiet resurgence has begun. The revival is not widespread or coordinated, yet it is real, measurable, and growing. To understand why this matters, the historical role of Aramaic must be viewed clearly. Aramaic as the language of daily life in the first century. During the days described in the New Testament, Aramaic functioned as the primary spoken language across Judea. Hebrew remained central in scripture and worship, but Aramaic shaped ordinary life. It carried the conversations of families. It filled the synagogues. Many of the teachings recorded in the Gospels were originally spoken in Aramaic before being written down in Greek. When this language faded, a major layer of Israel's cultural memory faded with it. For centuries, it existed only in texts and in a few diaspora communities. the modern landscape, and the unexpected revival. In the last decade, especially from 2022 onward, traces of Aramaic have begun to reappear inside Israel. The revival remains limited in size, but it is distinct. Several developments stand out. Small groups in Galilee have begun learning and speaking Aramaic at home. Certain academic institutions now teach the Targum, the ancient Aramaic translation of Scripture, with renewed emphasis. A few synagogues incorporate Aramaic phrases into readings and liturgy. Linguistic programs in universities have expanded to include practical study, not only textual analysis. These changes are occurring independently across different regions and institutions. Yet they form a consistent pattern. Aramaic is re-entering the national conversation after being absent for nearly 2 millennia. Why this revival matters in the prophetic pattern languages: preserve memory, transmit identity, and connect generations through shared expression. The return of Aramaic restores a bridge between the present and the world described in the New Testament era. It allows modern readers and students to engage with the cultural and linguistic environment of the first-century Jewish communities. This restoration also strengthens the connection between Israel today and the period in which foundational events of Scripture took place. When a language from that era begins to reappear, even in limited form, it signals a shift in cultural awareness and identity. The convergence with Hebrew's restoration. When viewed alongside the revival of ancient Hebrew, the return of Aramaic becomes even more significant. The two languages played distinct roles in Israel's past. Ancient Hebrew reflects the earliest identity of the nation, its formation, law, kingship, and covenant. Aramaic reflects the lived reality of the first-century communities, the environment of daily life during key moments of biblical history. For two languages from different eras to re-emerge within a short period is unusual. The timing suggests a broader restoration unfolding beneath the surface, one that strengthens historical continuity and reconnects modern Israel with the depth of its earlier identity. How Aramaic is returning in practice. Unlike Hebrew, which was revived at a national scale, Aramaic is returning in smaller circles. But the impact is still meaningful. Some examples include families teaching their children basic Aramaic phrases at home, local study groups meeting weekly to read the Targum together, academic programs offering conversational Aramaic alongside classical studies, digital platforms creating resources for learners inside Israel. This revival does not require national adoption to be significant. Its value lies in the fact that it is resurfacing at all after nearly 2,000 years of silence within the land. The prophetic implication Scripture often describes restoration as a multi-layer process. Land, people, covenant, city, worship, language, each layer reappears at its own time. The reemergence of Aramaic fits within this structure. It restores a missing piece of the cultural environment of the first century. It reconnects Israel with the linguistic context of events recorded in the Gospels, and it aligns with a broader movement in which ancient expressions of identity return simultaneously. When multiple layers of identity begin to realign, language, history, memory, the pattern deserves attention. These developments suggest that Israel is entering a phase where older foundations are being re-established, not through dramatic events, but through steady internal shifts that carry long-term significance. A signal beneath the surface. The revival of Aramaic is not loud. It does not appear in headlines, but it marks an important transition. A language that shaped the daily life of first-century Israel is returning after nearly 2,000 years of absence. And its return is taking place during the same period in which ancient Hebrew is being restored with unprecedented clarity. When examined together, These developments reveal a deeper continuity emerging within the nation, one that aligns with the restoration patterns recorded in Scripture. The language of Israel's past is entering the present again, and the timing suggests that this return is part of a much larger movement still unfolding. Archaeology confirming the language, the stones that speak, and the signs they reveal. Archaeology in Israel rarely moves slowly. Every year produces new information, new artifacts, and new fragments of history. But the discoveries made between 2023 and 2025 form a pattern that stands apart from previous decades. These findings do not simply add details to Israel's past, they confirm the exact forms of language now re-emerging in the present. Inscriptions, seals, and fragments from the First Temple period are appearing with unusual consistency. Many use Paleo-Hebrew, the same script that students are learning again. Others include phrasing and structure identical to the texts now being re-examined in linguistic research. The alignment is precise. The older forms of Hebrew and Aramaic being revived today match the artifacts being uncovered beneath the soil. This is not a coincidence of research trends. It reflects a convergence between the ancient record and the current moment. Two layers of history meeting at the same time. The surge of inscriptions from the First Temple period. Excavations across Jerusalem and the surrounding regions have revealed a number of inscriptions dating to the era of the early kings of Judah. Many carry important markers, family names that appear in the Old Testament, references to administrative roles described in Scripture, script forms identical to Paleo-Hebrew characters, writing styles matching the period before the Babylonian exile. One particular discovery stands out: a stone inscription referencing a royal steward, written in characters that correspond precisely to the alphabet taught in modern Paleo-Hebrew programs. The spacing, angles, and shape of the letters match the early First Temple script, confirming the accuracy of the revived forms used in education. Another set of inscriptions found near the city of David includes brief messages, likely administrative notes or property markers, but the significance lies in the handwriting style. The structure of the letters mirrors the earliest known biblical Hebrew inscriptions, showing continuity between the artifacts and the linguistic revival taking place today. Seals bearing names from biblical lineages. Archaeologists have also uncovered personal seals bearing the names of families and officials known from Scripture. These seals were used to stamp clay documents, marking ownership or authority. Many are written in Paleo-Hebrew and demonstrate the exact letter patterns being revived now. These seals confirm more than names. They confirm identity. They anchor the revived language within the physical record of Israel's early periods. They also reinforce the link between modern Israel and the people described in biblical history. The discovery of ancient administrative documents. Fragments of administrative documents from the 8th to 6th century BC have been unearthed in recent digs. Some include lists of contributions, references to storage facilities, or names of local officials. These documents are significant because they demonstrate how Hebrew functioned in daily governance before the exile. The language structures found in these texts align closely with the forms currently being studied. Students and researchers examining these fragments can read them using the same alphabet and grammar being reintroduced in modern programs. This convergence strengthens the idea that the revival of ancient Hebrew is not an isolated educational effort, but a restoration grounded in physical evidence. The role of archaeology in rebuilding identity archaeology verifies continuity. It turns history into measurable evidence. For a nation reviving ancient parts of its identity, archaeology plays a critical role. It confirms the continuity of culture, language, and memory. The stones uncovered today speak with the same characters, shapes, and structures that once recorded laws, letters, and daily life. This creates a direct link between Israel's present and its earliest recorded periods. The revived scripts being taught now are not reconstructions based on theory. They are reconstructions based on evidence, confirmed by discoveries being made across the land. The acceleration of discoveries between 2023 and 2025. One of the most striking aspects of this period is the acceleration of discoveries. Inscriptions are appearing in places that were previously unexamined or thought to be empty. Seals are emerging from layers of soil that had long been considered exhausted. New excavations are revealing texts carved into stone walls or pottery fragments that remained untouched for centuries. The timing is difficult to overlook. As the older forms of Hebrew and Aramaic are being revived in schools, research centers, and small communities, the land itself is producing the same forms through archaeology. The connection creates a pattern: revival above the ground, revelation beneath the ground, both aligned in the same window of time. The precision of the alignment. When the same script reappears simultaneously in education, research, and archaeology, the pattern becomes clear. The revival is not abstract, it is rooted in evidence. The inscriptions uncovered in the past few years include letters carved with the exact angles of Paleo-Hebrew, texts using early grammar structures now being taught again, personal seals whose names match biblical officials, administrative fragments whose terminology links directly to older covenant structures. This level of alignment is rare. Most archaeological periods produce a mix of styles and variations. What we see now is concentration, findings from a specific era matching the forms being revived today. The broader implication. Archaeology does more than confirm the past. It clarifies the present. The return of ancient Hebrew and Aramaic is unfolding during the same period when artifacts in those languages are appearing across Israel. This suggests a layered restoration, one that reestablishes linguistic memory while confirming it with physical evidence. It also mirrors a recurring scriptural pattern. When a nation approaches a stage of renewal, its oldest foundations become visible again. Text reappears. Memory returns. Identity strengthens. A signal emerging from the ground. The stones uncovered today carry the same characters written thousands of years ago. The same forms now returning in modern Israel. The same expressions that once shaped the nation during its earliest phases. The land is revealing what the people are reviving, and the timing points to more than archaeology. It reflects a restoration operating at a depth that cannot be produced by planning, education, or cultural interest alone. The foundations of Israel's identity are resurfacing in the earth, in the language, and in the national consciousness. And the alignment between these layers marks one of the clearest signals of the period we are now entering. The return of ancient Hebrew and the reappearance of Aramaic are not isolated developments. They form part of a structure recorded long before Israel's dispersion. The prophets described a restoration that would unfold in stages, each appearing at the appointed time. Land, people, cities, and identity would return layer by layer. Within that sequence, language was presented as one of the clearest signals that the nation had reached a significant point in its restoration. Among the prophetic writings, Zephaniah 3:9 stands out. It contains a statement that remained quiet for more than 26 centuries. "For then I will restore to the peoples a pure language." The verse makes no reference to conflict, empire, or foreign threat. It focuses on a restoration, something once present, then lost. then brought back. For generations, the idea seemed remote. The earliest forms of Hebrew were buried under centuries of dispersion. Aramaic had not been heard in the land since the 1st century, and the type of restoration described in the text appeared far beyond reach. Yet the details now visible in Israel align directly with that ancient declaration. A language dormant for centuries has returned. Older forms, long confined to stone inscriptions, are being revived with accuracy. Aramaic, the everyday speech of 1st century Judea, is re-entering communities. These developments echo the tone and timing of the prophecy: quiet, steady, and rooted in identity. Scripture lays out a predictable pattern for national restoration. A scattered people regather. The land regains strength. Cities grow. Memory returns. Then deeper layers of identity emerge. Language belongs to this final stage of internal restoration. It signals a shift occurring beneath the surface, a movement that strengthens the continuity between ancient Israel and the nation that exists today. Not a symbolic revival, but a recovery of the earliest expressions of the people. The timing is significant. 2,000 years produced no movement in this direction. The early scripts remained in museums and archaeological trenches. Aramaic survived only in distant communities. Even after Hebrew returned in the 19th century, its ancient forms remained untouched. But within a narrow span of years, both Paleo-Hebrew and Aramaic have begun resurfacing inside Israel. At the same time, archaeological discoveries are producing inscriptions that match the exact characters now being studied again. The alignment is precise. Revival above the ground is meeting evidence beneath the ground. This convergence marks a point worth noting. Multiple layers of identity, script, speech, memory, and history are being re-established simultaneously. None of these changes emerged from a coordinated national effort. They rose independently across education, archaeology, research centers, and local communities. This pattern aligns with the structure described in the prophetic writings: internal restoration preceding external transition. The internal core of the nation becomes more defined. The resurgence of ancient languages reconnects Israel with periods usually viewed as distant history: the era of the early kings and the era of the 1st century. These are not merely historical cycles. They are foundational epochs. When their languages return, the connection between past and present tightens. The nation becomes linked not only to the idea of its ancestors, but to the expressions, sounds, and written forms that shaped the original identity of the people. Prophecy often operates in patterns rather than isolated events. The prophets describe restoration as a movement, not a moment. They emphasize signs that appear before major transitions, quiet indicators that the structure of the nation is recalibrating. The revival of ancient Hebrew and the return of Aramaic fit this pattern. They do not alter borders or treaties, but they reshape the internal core of the nation. And when that core changes, the rest of the prophetic sequence gains clarity. What is happening in Israel now represents a return to origins that were inaccessible for centuries. The earliest layers of national identity are becoming part of the present again. The language of the First Temple period is understood by a new generation. The speech of the 1st century is entering homes and study halls. Archaeology confirms the accuracy of the revived forms. Education carries them forward. And Scripture anticipated a moment when such a restoration would take place. The line recorded in Zephaniah stood still for thousands of years. No generation could point to a movement that matched it. That silence has ended. The restoration has begun, and the evidence appears across multiple layers of national life: quiet, steady, and aligned with a pattern far older than modern Israel. A shift of this depth does not happen often. And when it does, it marks a turning point in the prophetic timeline the world rarely recognizes. The developments now unfolding in Israel point to a restoration that goes deeper than politics, security, or regional change. The return of ancient Hebrew, the reappearance of Aramaic, and the surge of archaeological discoveries reveal a shift taking place inside the nation, quiet, steady, and aligned with patterns recorded long before these events began. For centuries, these languages existed only in fragments. Paleo-Hebrew belonged to the earliest chapters of Israel's history. Aramaic belonged to the 1st century. Neither had a place in the daily life of the modern nation, yet both have returned within the same window of time, supported by evidence emerging from the ground and by renewed interest among younger generations. This signal rarely appears on the world's radar. It does not appear through crisis or dramatic headlines. It emerges through identity, one of the most consistent indicators in the prophetic record. When Scripture describes restoration, it points to internal alignment before external movement. It emphasizes the recovery of memory, continuity, and foundation. That stage is now visible. Israel is reconnecting with its earliest expressions, drawing from periods that shaped its formation and its role in the biblical timeline. The prophetic sequence does not hinge on a single event. It unfolds through a series of markers. Language is one of those markers, and the return of these ancient forms shows that a long, silent layer of prophecy has entered a new phase. The restoration is advancing, and its significance will become unmistakable as the pattern develops further.